our Prime Minister, who is the Prime Minister at the moment, and he did not speak out loudly enough and strongly enough when those people on the steps of the Opera House in Sydney were screaming out, "Where are the Jews?" And some even say, "Gas the Jews," they were saying. Shocking things. And interesting thing is, at that time, and from that, it's developed from that, because people thought they were emboldened because the government didn't speak out against it, didn't really come out strongly against it. So people thought they had the government on their side. They could continue this anti-Semitism. And we saw shuls burnt, and we saw graffiti, shocking graffiti. We saw assaults on Jews. People were frightened to walk out with their yarmulkes on. I mean, what's been going on in the last 2 years has been disgraceful. But you know what? Today, just today, and I'll tell you something very, very, very interesting. Since that terrorist attack, on the first night of Hanukkah and Bondi Beach, another icon of Australia, since that attack, and we know 15 innocent, I call them Australians of the Jewish, well, actually 14 were Australians of the Jewish faith. One was a non-Jew who was slaughtered that day by terrorists. And since that time, Australians have now risen up and said, what's going on in our country? What is going on in our country? And until today, the Prime Minister did not even look into a thorough investigation as to the background of this. Now, this is the biggest terrorist attack in Australian history. And until today, because I've got the paper here, there's thousands of good Australians who have spoken up and said, this cannot be tolerated in this country. And why is it being tolerated? Because, and I'm going to say it, our government here need certain seats to stay in power. And those seats in Sydney and Western Sydney are Islamic mainly. And they've allowed ISIS people into the country, unchecked into the country. They've allowed these preachers to continue preaching hate and extremism in the streets of Sydney because it was politically expedient for this government to allow that. But now the Australian people have woken up to it. And there's been protests over the last 2 weeks of really decent Australians, good Australians, who have said, we're not tolerating this. And today, the Prime Minister caved in. And he's now having a royal commission, which is a thorough investigation. These ones who have risen up over the last few weeks, I mean, it hasn't really been rising up by demonstrations or anything. They've been in the media saying top lawyers, top doctors, top sportsmen, all walks of life, coming out and saying, you have to make a royal commission here because this is disastrous for Australia's reputation around the world. This is the biggest terrorist attack in history in Australia, and you have to do something about it. And he was very reticent, because why was he reticent? In my view, because he's worried about being found out. But he's now allowing the royal commission, but at the same time, the weight is more on his side, because who he's chosen to be the commissioner is also a lefty, a real lefty. So, we have to thank Hashem for the small mercy of this